Now, today we're going to get into Archive 81, and this one definitely creeped me out. Why? Because the series gets very specific about things that only we've covered recently on this channel. They talk about how DNA collection companies are secretly searching for people in certain bloodlines. They discuss the Russian nesting dolls. And they also talk about how time travel is really spirit possession or communication with demonic entities. The series even discusses how black goo that's held in these canopic jars is really about ancient fallen DNA and portals for demons to transfer through into the future, into our modern times. They also talk about night terrors and how somatic sound resonance is the mechanism for creation, but it also is being used by the enemy to try to pierce the veil or to break through the firmament. So before we get into this montage, let me give you the backdrop of this series, Archive 81. So this man here stumbles across this video and some audio tapes as well that are recorded by this woman. And the woman recorded them back in 1984. And this guy is reviewing the material in the present time. And this woman was actually investigating a demonic cult that operated out of this apartment building called the Visser. Visser. Now, Visser, of course, to me sounds like hisser, which was what snakes do. But there's more. Now, this guy's approached by this wealthy man from some secret company that they can't find out what this company is all about. And this man tells him that he'll pay him $100,000 to seclude himself at a very high security, creepy house out in the middle of the woods. Why? So he could repair, edit, and view the videotapes that were retrieved when the fire broke out in the Visser and burned it to the ground. Now remember this fire aspect of this, because this is going to come back around at the end of the decode. So as he begins to decode these tapes, he realizes that he is actually front and center and very much a part of this plot of this sick, twisted nightmare that he finds himself in. He ends up seeing beyond the veil, and he is able to look through time to see this woman in the video recordings from 1994. But she sees him too, in some weird time paradox thing going on. Now, he realizes that she is trapped between now and 1994 when the portal was opened just before the fire. And he tries to save her. How? By reopening the portal. But what happens at the end of the series, he finds himself trapped in 1994. Now, we'll get more into this, but there's another aspect to the series that's very important. The cult is actually a comet mold cult. Now, the mold is the visible sign, they say, that the alternate universe is starting to spread into ours. And they always do their sacrifices during these close approaches of comets. Now, the comet that they worship in the series, the name actually sounds like Corona. Now, of course, this was all filmed and made after the start of the spamdemic, but you're going to see elements of everything we've talked about the end game of what VidCo really is, what the purpose of it is, and where it's all headed in the future. Now, for those of you that have followed this channel for the last 10 years, you know that we've talked about the dark spiritual nature of comets and how they were thought to cause disease or bring about disease or mark the beginning of periods of disease. And we had found in the book of Ezekiel that there was this strange passage that describes abominations inside of walls in the cult of Tammuz. Now, I'm starting to wonder, are these abominations inside of walls? Is this like the mold that grows inside of walls? Well, we're going to answer all of that today and when we get into this montage. And we'll get into the mold later, because in the decode, I believe that this is one of the bioweapons of the enemy that will infect mankind with these toxins that thin the veil between the spirit realm and ours, opening people up to possession. Think of it as, imagine like we all got dosed with ayahuasca. Well, the mold has mycotoxins in it too that begin to affect the mind and brain, and also open people up to spiritual battle. So, as you can see, much of what we've been covering on this channel in the recent years is in the series. It's like a magnum opus of all the work that we've done here in the last 10 years. So let's start to pull this series apart. Let me make sure you guys are with me, and then we'll get into this here. Welcome to the channel, everybody. All right. So there's a mask, of course. Let's play this first part. Now, this first part is all about, in my opinion, 23andMe, because the series reveals that this DNA collection company called Wellspring, it was just a cover to find these people from a specific bloodline, and their blood was the only blood that could open up these portals. And what they would do is they would pour the blood onto this graven image, and it would open the portal. Let's watch.
We're all searching for something. Find your history. Find yourself. Give yourself the gift of knowing who you really are. Order your personal DNA kit today and give yourself the gift of knowing who you really are. Order your personal DNA kit today and receive 50% off your first report. Wellspring, your story starts here.
Now, let me get the volume right on here. I don't want you guys to not be able to hear this. So let's get that up there. So this is Wellspring. It's a cover story so that they can search out this specific bloodline that they need to pierce the veil. Now, the family bloodline they're looking for is called Baldoon. Now, I did not dig into Baldoon and what that might mean. I didn't search the word because there's so much we're going to cover today, you guys. We're going to probably be on here the full hour. So I don't want to overwhelm you because you can go down 100 rabbit holes with these kinds of decodes. But if any of you want to research Baldoon and what that might mean, Baldun, feel free to do that and put it in the chat if you find anything interesting. Now, let's keep watching here.
Wellspring. This guy had some kind of a DNA company that he shut down. I mean, I think it's just a big front for collecting personal data. Who is he looking for?
Now, they drop a lot of F-bombs in here, so every time you see it skip like that, I'm trying to skip out the F-bomb. It's weird. It's almost as if in the series, every time a nugget of truth was dropped, they would drop the F-bomb right along with it.
He's looking for someone, babe. And why the is there blood in these refrigerators? Look at
this. Now, this next part, he's going to mention the nested reality. Things within things. Now, we've had many discussions about the nested reality. As you guys know, we figured out that basically we live in a Russian doll's universe where smaller things represent larger things. And the most basic example of this would be the elemental chart, the periodic table, showing all of the elements. And there's videos here on YouTube that actually show that the elements are separated by nothing more than the number of electrons and the number of shells, because these electrons form shells around the nucleus of the atom. And in many instances also there are different numbers of protons and electrons, but mostly it's the shells of how many electrons they have, orbiting the outside of the atom. And so heavy elements have more shells and more protons and neutrons, and lighter elements and gases have less. And that's kind of how it works. The nested reality. Now, if we think about nests, we think about trees, don't we? Nests are in trees, aren't they? So let's keep watching here and listen to this.
Basically, Legacy Management Global is an iceberg, or Afghan Russian nesting doll.
Can Russian nesting doll. Can Russian nesting doll.
Osprey never even showed up, which means it's probably an offshoot of an offshoot.
Aren't you the guy that goes on stage and tells stories about demon sex cults and time traveling and pirate radio stations from another dimension?
So this guy is his friend who tries to keep in contact with him as he goes into this secluded high security house, and he's decoding the tapes, and he's trying to help his friend here, investigate, these tapes. And this is right down this guy's alley because he runs a podcast, and we'll get into that too, because it's got 5G Whiz written all over it. So let's keep watching here, because here you just heard him talk about how time travel and the occult are interrelated. This is another topic that we've covered extensively on this channel.
Yes, but that's my podcast, and this is real life.
Now, there's this other weird thing going on in the series, because it's not really weird because this is a dark series. All of the door, or not all of the doors, but many of the door numbers add up to 6. And in fact, the 6th floor is forbidden. No one's allowed to go on the 6th floor in the building. So this room number is 2D. So 2 and 4 is 6. And there's also a 4B room number. That's another 6. So of course, it's all about 666, right?
Stay away from the 6th floor. That's the conclusion of the tour. Any comments or questions, put them in writing.
Do you have any advice for getting to know people in the building? Do you have any advice?
That's the conclusion of the tour. Any comments or questions, put them in writing.
Do you have any advice?
So you have 6 and a 6 and a 6. Now this woman, she's the one that recorded the tapes in 1994 that were later found. They were all burned and they had to be put back together and edited and everything.
Jess? Hello?
The lights were off.
Here's a 1984 clue, and this is exactly where we're at now. It's all about 1984. Look at his shirt. It's the Ministry of Fear.
The lights were off.
Eleanor was part of a movement called Spirit Receivers.
Now we're going to get into these spirit receivers. Now, this is crazy. So the series gets into these spirit receivers, and they end up becoming the sacrificial victims. And what happens is, they explain it here, that the demons actually work through these creative people's art. So anything that they draw, or their voice, or a song that's composed, or anything like that, is the work of the demons working through them to manifest Satan's plan. And that's how they're chosen. Once they've been identified as someone whose voice or art is basically putting down Satan's plans, they then are chosen as the sacrifice. Now, this sounds a lot like Hollywood, doesn't it? We do a lot of these decodes, but when you really think about it, these writings of these films, these screen, the plots of these films come out of a very small group of people called screenwriters. And then the directors help fine tune everything. But, the scripts all come out of these screenwriters. And I believe that that's who they're talking about here. They are these spirit receivers, and they publish Satan's agenda to deceive the world. Listen.
A radical group of abstract artists.
Now, this is a screenshot from the series, and in the middle here, you see the XIX card. Now, we've been talking all about this tarot card, haven't we? The 19th tarot card, and it depicts the rider on the white horse in some depictions of the card. Not all of the art is the same on these cards, but what is similar between the cards is this the sun. This is the sun card. There's a corona, huge prominent corona around it. And there's usually a rider on a white horse wearing a crown and carrying a ribbon bow, just like in Revelation. let's look at some of the other variations on this tarot card that were not in the series, but I pulled up that we'd covered in the past. Here's one here. And as you can see, there's a prominent wall. There's the solar corona. And this is actually called a Trump card. Okay, it's called the Trump card. So we know Trump's a Gemini twins. We know he wanted to build a wall. We know he bought the bow and the crown, right? The toxone. We know he brought that. And we know that he wants to be Apollo, the sun. So this card is screaming Apollo. It's screaming Trump to me. Keep going here. Here's another variation of the 19th card. This one is very specific. It has the ribbon, the bow. It has the crown on her head, a wreath of flowers, and it has also the crown of the sun and the prominent wall and the white horse. This is the Revelation 2 or 6-2 prophecy here playing out.
She belonged to a group of artists who called themselves spirit receivers.
In 1974, Eleanor and her sister Cassandra moved to New York City.
They believed mysterious beings were speaking through them to manifest art and beauty and truth.
Who explored roles as mediums for supernatural messages.
Some people called them a cult. Is that what you were asking about?
And established the wall galleries, where they exhibited the work of spirit receivers from the spirit realm and beyond.
No certainty of who or what she was communicating with.
So, little wall galleries. Now, that word wall, the Wall family, the Walmart family, right? We looked that up, and it means to smite or hit or to, like, kill. That's what the word wall means. It comes out of the word vol, which that's where the word Valentine's came up. Valentine's Day is coming up, isn't it? All this stuff is a cult. And this is what these people want to do, but they have to do it secretly, because if they do it right in our faces, people would rebel, drag them out of their homes, and that would be the end of that. So everything's a lie, the father of the lie. This is why Satan has to lie, because if he were to tell the truth about what he was trying to do, nobody would follow him, would they? So this goes on. And I also want you to know that I did my best to remove anything in this decode that would, be detrimental to your spiritual health. Okay, because we got to be careful with this stuff. As things begin to intensify in the spiritual battle, we don't want to be filling our heads with all kinds of crazy stuff. And so for that reason, I did not include images of the specific images from the ritual. And I tried to leave out as much of the music as I could. And that's why you're seeing very short clips here. Now, after this particular aspect of the series, now we're going to switch gears and talk about comets. Now, like I said, we talked a lot about comets before. When Comet Ison came through, we had just started this channel. And that, I believe, is when the world really changed. The censorship increased. The machine was in place to begin to censor all the social media platforms, starting with YouTube, and then it trickled on from there. Google bought YouTube, and just everything changed at that point. And there were obvious sacrifices going on, and as well as unapologetic tyranny. That's when it all kind of started, wasn't it? It was like 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. We also know that Handy Sook happened very close to Comet Ison as well. Now, I personally think that comets are visual representations of demonic spirits. And I believe that their close approaches are basically starting points for plague and for the enemy to unleash these things onto the world. It's often understood by people who have read history that the Black Death was said to have coincided with the approach of a comet. So I checked to see if there were any naked eye comets. Let's see if I have that pulled up here, that made their approach, during this time frame of when VidCo-19 started. And sure enough, there was. This is Comet Neowise. Many of you will remember this. It was one of the most recent comets that could be seen with the naked eye. and it popped off and was visible by the naked eye somewhere around when we were all locked down in our homes for the first 2 weeks. Right around March, April is when they were able to first start seeing this comet. Now, I think I have an image of this here. Here's an image of Neowise above Stonehenge. Look at that. Very prominent comet seen with the naked eye. And so now we're going to skip gears and talk about comets as it relates to the series.
You know, it really was something to watch her create. No idea what her brushstroke would reveal. We can't begin to imagine the worlds which lie undiscovered. I only hope my Eleanor is waiting in one of them.
Aren't comets supposed to bring about end times or something?
Do you think that's science?
Maybe.
I'm writing about Comet Charon.
So, Comet Charon sounds like Charon, right? This is obviously what they were getting at. And it brings about death.
It used to be like really famous. There were songs about it and everything, but...
So I looked up the word Charon, and look, you can see in the Greek, Charon or crown is spelled almost exactly like it, Korone. Okay. It's also spelled, there's other variations of it that look very close to what they're talking about here. Anything curved like a crown. And I looked it up in Bangla, which is a language, and the exact spelling of how they spell it in the series means oozing, or what else does it say here? Dripping in English, oozing, exudation, and finally, destruction. And that's exactly what mold does.
Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the great comet Charon. To the heavens and the great night sky and all that lies within it.
Hear, hear.
Anyway, it's supposed to be visible in a couple weeks. Sam got me that new telescope, see?
It's Charonite.
Now, she pulls out, now this lady's evil. She's like part of the cult. And she pulls out this stone on a necklace. And it's Charonite, right? As you just heard her say. And it's the black goo or the mold. And she brings it out in this mason jar. And I believe what you're going to see next really symbolizes the ancient Egyptian canopic jars, which we've talked about at length as well on this channel. We explained in previous decodes that this black goo is the conduit to open up portals into people's souls, the serpent in the chest for demon possession.
It's very rare. They say it came from a comet. The blacks are incredible. Miss Eleanor mixed all the room paint. Oh, wait a moment. Oh, better it get some use than waste away. Yes, here.
So that's like the canopic jar. This is clearly what they're getting at here. I'm shocked that she didn't bring it out in an actual canopic jar just to nail things down, but let's keep watching.
Take this.
Seriously?
Eleanor would want you to have it.
Maybe I can conjure something with this paint, like Eleanor and her ghost strokes.
This paint is like a portal into Eleanor's soul.
So now you know we're not making all this up, because it's repeated too many times in these types of series, almost as if they're watching the channel, but they're really not. I believe what they're doing is this is a spiritual battle. So as soon as it's disclosed on this channel, they have to hurry up and run around and try to figure out a way to whitewash it, but also continue the sorcery. Now, she gives her friend that jar, right? And so the friend starts using it to paint, and then she becomes one of these possessed spirit receivers. Now, understand that scientists are working on the same thing as we speak, trying to use the canopic black goo to reanimate these ancient pharaohs. And when they say that there is someone in there. That's the serpent in the chest. Let's watch.
Oh my god. It's just fucking amazing. Oh, I feel like I'm time traveling.
Do you understand now? It's time travel. That's what it is. It's possession. So when the goo reinfects a new host here in modern times, it feels like they're time traveling. They went from the past to the present, right?
There's someone in there, Mel.
There's someone in there. That's the portal.
There's someone in there.
So her friend goes crazy. She becomes a spirit receiver, and she's obsessed with the portal, the possession, right? Obviously. This is the girl when she was little. Same thing happened to her because she's part of the bloodline, but she doesn't know it yet.
What are these?
There's another place. There's something in there.
Holy shit.
So here's an Anubis sighting. Many of you know the ancient Egyptian god Anubis. He was the god of embalming the canopic jars, in case you had any doubts. And what they did was they preserved the internal organs of the pharaohs in these jars so that they could go into the quote-unquote afterlife. Well, what do you think that meant? The afterlife is now. And basically they're able to the internal organs would degrade into this just disgusting black goo, and it was basically pure DNA of the fallen angels.
Those teeth?
So Anubis sighting there. Now the series is going to get into frequencies and their role in opening portals. Now, of course, that's another topic we've discussed at length as well. Now, these are some papers. We're going to break this down as well. But basically, since creation basically is held together by frequencies. And so it begs a question, are they integral in weakening the veil? Or at least the enemy thinks that they can. But creation is frequency. That's what creation is held together by. If you think about it, somatics, the vibrations of the electrons, everything is vibrating at this frequency. And that's how our reality was created. Now, I believe that these frequencies are affected by EMFs or 5G whiz. Now, here are some papers that they actually talk about frequency. And these papers appear in the series here, as you can see. Let's read this abstract, because this is crazy. It says, everything in our world has its own electromagnetic resonance, a frequency at which all molecules vibrate. This frequency, more commonly known as the Schumann resonance, is supposedly the key to bringing our bodies into natural harmony with our environments. However, I believe that by altering the natural frequency at which a molecule vibrates, we are not merely putting molecules out of sync with our natural, let's go down here, with our natural resonance, but also creating a cross-dimensional bridge as the molecules attempt to sync with both its intrinsic resonance and its newfound frequency. So here's one of the papers. Now, who wrote these papers? Well, in the series, it's this guy's father. And this is when he discovered that his father was involved in the events that took place in 1984 that he's decoding on these films. Now, before they perform their ritual sacrifice to open the portal, they hit these tuning forks.
Great space.
And I think that's what the tuning forks represent, these frequencies. And they need to hit the tuning forks every time they try to pierce the veil. Now, here's his friend. Here is the podcast that he runs. And as you can see,
here for Mystery
Signals is the name of his podcast. That's got to be 5G Whiz. And look, it even forms a cross here in the middle. Okay. And it almost looks like a G Whiz tower, doesn't it? So very weird. Now, I believe that all of this is happening right now and that people have been acting very strange, haven't they? And I think all this has to do with frequency signals and combined with the Pokemon sticker. Notice how strangely all these NFL players are behaving. Have you guys heard about the Browns player, Malik McDowell? He got arrested for public exposure. He walked into a children's learning center and completely naked. And then there's another Brown story here of a player losing it. Antonio Brown removed his jersey, stormed off the field without his jersey on. Nobody knew what he was doing. They're like, dude, are you like on something? Well, I believe that there's something to this. And I don't know what yet, but people are acting very bizarre. And it has something to do with everything that's happening right now. You've also got female celebrities, for some reason, feeling like they have to take their clothes off at 50 and 60 years old, but posting pics on their Instagrams. I know a lot of people have done this, but now it's like regular people. It's like people who never did this kind of thing before, starting to remove their clothes. So everybody's taking their clothes off and running around. It almost reminds me of the Flocka days. Remember that? And I'm wondering if this is the beginnings of spirit possession. I'm wondering if that has something to do with that. Here's another crazy story. This pastor in Tulsa, under fire for rubbing spit into a man's face during a sermon. Just people doing crazy stuff. I bet you all these people got the sticker. So there's some kind of phenomenon going on. I think it's going to worsen over time. So we talked about the papers that his dad wrote. We talked about the using vibrational frequency or electromagnetic resonance to open up gates to other worlds. And the EMF component to it, or the 5G Whiz. And I think that'll be integral in becoming like the tuning forks that turn humanity into batteries to power up their portal so that they can open up the veil or the pit.
Signals. Show's not till 8. Get your ticket to the door.
We might be able to talk about how he's handling his isolation.
Every world has its own frequency.
Here you see the somatic diagrams here, somatic readings, and they talk about every world having its own frequency. Let's back that up a little bit so you can hear that again. You heard the tone go off. Those are the tuning forks that they use.
His isolation.
Every world has its own frequency. Finding the right one is the only way to open the door.
All those people in there you're planning to sacrifice.
Great good.
I think they're at a party, Iris. Not being used as human batteries for your fucking jailbreak.
Human batteries. So there you go. Exactly what we've been talking about for her jailbreak. Now, this was in 1924. This was the first time that they opened the portal in 1924. And the building, again, burned down. And when that burned down, they built the Visser in its place, and that burned down too. So there were 2 building burnings. And it's important to remember that when we get to the end of the decode here, because it's all going to make sense. Now, another one of the dad's papers talks about how hallucinogens open portals too. And this is important because this ties into the whole mold mycotoxin release that can cause these kinds of hallucinations and behaviors. And in this abstract here, let me see if we can get a better image of that. It says, experience and hallucinatory perceptions of bipolar patients. Let's read this. The paper discusses the methods and effectiveness of Dr. Simone Mills' 1967 research on the ability of patients suffering from bipolar disorder to achieve states of heightened consciousness and perception through the use of hallucinogenic substances. While the scientific community has long dismissed Mills' research, mostly due to the unethical circumstances in which he conducted experiments, studying his results give us a vital window into how hallucinogenic agents can be used to expand our consciousness. Think of it this way. When people take ayahuasca, really what they're doing is communing with demons at that point. They're opening up these portals that were not meant to be opened. And they're going to try to do the same thing with the mold. And you're going to see how they're going to do it as we get into this decode. Now, there's one more paper that his dad wrote, and it's about night terrors. And I believe the night terrors are really just a spiritual attack on God's bloodline, because the enemies know the bloodlines too. And so they're coming after these people. So don't look at night terrors as necessarily a bad thing. It means you're someone special and that the enemy is coming after you early on in life. I had night terrors when I was just a child. And I remember, wanting to know why God wasn't protecting me. Well, as my life went on, I realized that the night terrors were just simply a fear mechanism that the enemy was using to throw me off the trail, to make me not believe in God. And that really they couldn't hurt you. I mean, I don't know. Some people, I guess, have been hurt having night terrors, and there's actual physical activity going on with these kinds of things, thrown around the room and things like that. But I never experienced that. I would just become frozen and a dark figure would enter the room and I would just be terrified at like 5, 6, 7 years old. And I, after a while, I would call out the name of God and I felt protected. And then later in my life, he said, when you're in that state, understand that nothing bad can happen to you. It's just all fear. It's all in the mind. And if you fear God instead of the enemy, then nothing will happen to you. And many times I was able to wake myself up out of these states of night terror. So let's keep watching.
You made a TV show that never aired?
The Circle, yes. I'm afraid all the footage was lost after the accident.
I heard The Circle was inspired by a snuff film.
It inspired Daddy to create The Circle.
So the cult originated out of the first sacrifice that happened in 1924, in which they realized that they could capture the essence of these spirits with photography, and they became obsessed with it. And so they would keep sacrificing more and more, and they would try to capture it with a photograph. And then they were like, wow, how much more could we capture with moving film? So then they got like a camera, this old 1924 camera, and they did the sacrifice and tried to see if they could capture any of this on film. And so this film that they're talking about here, called The Circle, they made that film to memorialize the ritual that somebody had seen with their own eyes. So you remember the decode that we did on CERN, on the CERN documentary by the same name? The CERN documentary was called The Circle, remember? And it was about the people that live in the villages above CERN. So The Circle is CERN. Let's keep watching.
All we have are the scripts, of course, but apparently Daddy went to some old occult lodge in the Hollywood Hills, very exclusive. Los Angeles was once the occult capital of the world, you know. There were all sorts of skull and bones types in that town. After dinner, they were blindfolded and led through the canyon to an underground bunker, sworn to secrecy, and then they watched them. Mummy's quite sure it was a hoax, but apparently it was some kind of ritual sacrifice. Very gruesome.
And if this other world exists, some believe it lies at the very center of the circle. Perhaps you catch a glimpse of yourself across a crowded room. No, not a mirror, but another you.
So obviously there's a statement there about doppelgangers. Another subject we've been talking about extensively, and because we looked at the first 7 generations from Adam to between Adam and Cain. And we realize that, first of all, the Bible mentions those two bloodlines separately. Cain is not included in Adam's bloodline in the Bible. And we notice something else that was very strange, that every time Adam had a son, Cain would have a son and name him almost the exact same thing with a slight variation. How can that be? How is it that two different bloodlines have almost the same name? So, for instance, there's an Erad on Cain's side, and there's a Jared on Adam's side. Or I should say Seth. And then there's a Methuselah on Adam's side, or Seth's side, and there's a Methusael on Cain's side. Each bloodline has an Enoch too. There's a good Enoch and a bad Enoch. And there are several more crossover names. It's unbelievable. So this reminds me of doppelgangers, right? A mirror person of you who's evil in a different bloodline. So I don't know how this, I don't know the details of this, but that was just something we noticed when we looked at these two bloodlines. You could look it up yourself. Just go on and search for, the bloodlines of Seth compared to Cain, or Adam compared to Cain, and you'll see the names. You could just do a little acrostic. You just connect the lines on each of the sides, and they all match up. It's unbelievable. Let's keep watching.
He says he needs us to.
And that brings us to the mold. So this mold starts to grow in the Visser apartment building every time they do a sacrifice. And pretty soon it starts consuming the building. It's like inside of all the walls and everything. And they hit those tuning forks that we talked about as part of the ritual. And that releases the frequency to open the portals. Well, did you know that 5G Wiz encourages toxic mold growth? Did you know this? I got a couple articles pulled up here. And here's a doctor. Many of you have seen this. This is from the Mold Guy website. And he talks about this doctor named Dr. Klinghardt, who discovered a connection between EMF and mold. During his research, he found that EMFs could be responsible for driving certain molds to produce mycotoxins. In other words, electromagnetic fields could be making molds more aggressive and reactive. And then here's another source who says the same thing. This is moldhelpforyou.com, and they say the exact same thing. Mycotoxins. In other words, electromagnetic fields could be making molds more aggressive and reactive. So I wanted to see if Dr. Klinghardt had been fact-checked. And in fact, he has not. I typed in Klinghardt mold fact check, and nobody's fact checked this guy. So his findings seem to be legit. So think of the implications of that. We're now surrounded by G-Wiz towers all over the place. And I'm starting to see a phenomenon occur. And I don't know if you guys have as well, that this mold is growing out of control, growing in places where it didn't used to grow, in cities that it didn't used to grow. And this may all be part of some kind of massive bioweapon. Now, listen to what the series says about the mold, and we'll keep going with this.
Open it.
But another you.
He says he needs us to open a door.
Who needs you to open the door?
No, don't worry. I didn't give your friend a taste.
A taste of what?
Stardust. It grows here. It shimmers. Haven't you seen it?
What's stardust? Heroin?
The mold. The walls. The floors. The lungs. Running through this building like deep, dark veins. One hit. And it's like another world opens up. And there's no going back.
She's been using this paint. I think it's made out of some kind of mold that grows in our building. The moment she started using it, she was a completely different person. Mold. It's the mold.
Now, what I think they're talking about here when they're talking and explaining the mold, I believe this goes back to these abominations inside of the walls spoken about in Ezekiel. the cult of Tammuz.
What about mold?
Mold. It's possible ingesting or breathing a neurotoxic mold could cause hallucinations or other kinds of neurological damage.
So the mold infects, it opens a victim up to possession as well as, spiritual attack. Now, the mold, as you're going to see here, grows in these spiral patterns on the walls and around here, or almost like a somatic pattern is what it looks like. Some kind of somatic readout frequency is what it looks like. How sand self-organizes in these somatic models that they have. They basically put a speaker, a vibration, some kind of vibration or sound source underneath a medium that is that can move, like sand. You could use probably sugar, things like that. And then they send these sound waves through onto the surface of where the medium is, and it self-organizes into these geometric patterns, which shouldn't be able to happen. It should be random, right? But it's not. So when you hit a certain note, it organizes and forms these perfect geometric shapes out of the sand and out of the salt. It's unbelievable. It's basically supernatural. There you see the spiral patterns on the wall, or somatic patterns of the mold growth. So doesn't this sound like the abominations in Ezekiel inside of the wall, the cult of Tammuz? Now you're going to hear her say next, body and blood. But of course, this is not the body and blood of Christ. This is the body and blood of evil. So it'd be the Antichrist.
This is what proves it's not a dream. This is the fruit of our faith and devotion.
Now, every time the main character goes into the interdimensionally and communicate with the girl, you'll see these mold spores floating around his head and all around the room. It reminds me kind of iPad Goat, where you see these, what we thought were snowdrifts, and I guess they probably are, but they're everywhere. And I wonder if that was a harbinger about this mold growth growing everywhere.
Iris Voss. Very Madame Blavatsky. She came over from Europe after World War I. The woman.
So her name's Iris, of course. That's also a portal, the window to the soul in your eyes. So it's a perfect name that they gave this woman, Iris, from 1924, who kind of started the cult. And they explain that here.
In the middle. She's the ringleader.
Evie Crest claimed that the circle was inspired by a snuff film her father saw in some Skull and Bones bachelor party in the 40s.
Very soon, the comet will pass so close to the Earth that you'll be able to see it with your very own eyes. We'll have a grand party to celebrate the good luck and fortune it will bring. Not to mention the thinning of the veil between the worlds.
It's a manifestation of the divine. It's the matter of a shared universe, body and blood.
His body and blood. They're pushing through the veil that separates us. He's calling to us.
So, of course, the masks go on, Illuminati all over this. So I left out most of the ritual. Here's the creepy graven image. I'm not going to show you that.
The comet opens the door. Cassandra told me they're going to open the door tonight.
Oh, the ritual is happening tonight.
He's up there.
The comet?
The comet.
I need your help to get her out.
Now, so what does all this mean? Well, with the mold and everything. Well, it means we've been experiencing exponential toxic mold growth in our time due to these increased EMF levels. And it didn't start with 5. It could have started with 2, couldn't it have? Because they're all EMF. I mean, the more electricity that you have around you, the more these mold mycotoxins release. And so that is a profound revelation, because up to this point, no one, I don't think, really thought about this. And maybe you in the chat have taken note of mold growing, where when you were younger, in your younger years, you didn't remember all this mold growing everywhere. So they basically want to make all of humanity fall under this mind-altering mycotoxins to open us all up for possession. Somehow it's going to be able to open these gates, and people will be much more easily influenced. And so that's what I think they're heading with this. Now, you heard them say that the mold is the fruit of their faith, the body and blood. And when we link this back to Tammuz, we understand that Tammuz also had as his symbol a cross. He was the knockoff Christ. So instead of the body and blood of Christ, we have the body and blood of Tammuz, the Antichrist. Now, when they do this ritual, understand that there are some very graphic and troubling scenes, and I'm not showing you these in this decode. And I don't recommend you watch this series. I truly believe that the people that do these kinds of decodes are messengers of God. You know, we're here to help wake people up to understand that everything that comes through your television is from the enemy. And it doesn't mean you have to turn it off, but at least understand what you're looking at, because this is our reality. I mean, unless you're willing to go completely into the wilderness and cut yourself off from everything, then we all have to come to terms with the fact that we are in this reality. We're in the world, but not of it, right? And that is in the Bible. But unless you have special armor to withstand this stuff, then this can negatively affect you. Okay, and so you don't want this stuff in your head. You don't want this. So I'm trying to do this decode in a way to where I can show you what the messages are without exposing you to the evil. Okay, so let's keep watching. So then what else do we have here? Now, let's just go back to this weird thing here. So what they do, I'll just explain it to you very quickly. Let's play this here. So what they do is they take the bloodline and they pour it onto this thing, and it fills up all these cracks inside of his, and it's like supernatural. It like basically is anti-gravitical. It goes upwards and downwards and sidewards, and it's really creepy to look at, which is why I didn't show it to you.
The comet opens the door. Cassandra told me they're going to open the door tonight.
Oh, the ritual is happening tonight.
She's up there.
The comet?
The comet.
Now, this next part is pretty chilling, because how long have we been talking about the trees of the garden? And we discovered that they probably represent the different frames of reality, the different laws of physics. Well, listen to this guy repeat almost verbatim what we've been saying in previous shows. This is crazy.
I need your help to get her out.
It's not a hospitable environment for a human being. Time and space do not operate in the same way. No one can survive in there for any length of time. The mechanics of that universe are entirely different. I've spent the better part of 20 years researching the properties of this dimension, formulating a strategy to access its powers.
I don't know what to tell you. She's in there. I need to get her out.
Davenport said it wasn't possible for a human to survive in there.
It will be disorienting. Time doesn't move in the same way. And he'll want to keep you there, Kalego. He'll want you to stay. He'll try to trick you into surrendering.
Wait, what does that mean exactly?
He's desperate. Lonely.
So the main character goes through the veil, and he's to try to rescue the girl, but he gets sent back to 1994 when the building caught fire. He was actually in the fire. So the final scene that you're going to see here of the entire series is a reflection of another pair of buildings that caught fire. Of course, that would be the Slim Towers. Watch.
How did I get here?
Well, all I know is that you were luckier than the rest.
The rest?
Did you live there? Were you close to your neighbors?
Live where?
To Visser. So tragic. All those people.
What year?
I'll be right back.
So he turns on the TV and he sees that it's the day that Kurt Cobain died, 1994. So he has been transported in time. Now, I don't know the Kurt Cobain aspect to this, how that fits in. I didn't go down that rabbit hole because it's a whole nother rabbit hole. But watch what he does. He gets up, he walks to the window, and you're going to see the Slim Towers. And now you know why these buildings caught fire. It was to open a portal. Like we've been saying for the last 5 years, this was a ritual to open the veil, to tear the veil. And we had talked about the spiritual significance of this whole center, right? The fact that the building 7, I'm being careful with my words here because I don't like you to talk about this stuff and I don't want this video to get suppressed. But building 7 represented Christ. The 2 towers represented the 2 magnetic fields of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. 2 opposing magnetic fields. This is why we can never come together, because our entire physical reality is based on opposites, or a positive and negative, I should say. And so this is why we have a positive, negative political system. The enemy built the construct in that way so that people could never come together to overthrow their controllers. Okay, so all you got to do is keep dividing people. Divide, divide, divide. This is what the enemy does. He's done some of that here in the truth community too. That's why I keep trying to tell you. You guys, channels that sit and focus on calling other channels shield, that's the divide and conquer mentality. Because they claim more street cred because they're calling out and infiltrating the community and saying that these people are infiltrators. So it's okay to mention that sometimes, but if they've built their entire channel on just sitting around nitpicking other channels, that tells you something. That's of the enemy, trying to do the exact same paradigm that he's used to divide Americans and people all around the world. Okay, so what you have here is these 2 trees. Tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's actually one tree, but it's split up into good and evil. And this is the prison we're trapped in. This is why the people were trapped in there. The Wicker Man, we'll get more into that as well. The Wicker Man cult of building a building and then trapping everyone in it and lighting it on fire. This is what the Wicker Man cult was all about. And so the enemy wants to burn it all down with everything in it. And this is what this represents. Then he made his own single tower so that he could bring it all back under his rule. And that's where we're heading toward next. And if you're not part of his single tower, if you're not into free love and do what you will, then you become persecuted, I should say. And that's where we're all headed. And we can all feel it now. We're entering this new dimension where they're not going to basically, they're going to have no mercy basically at a certain point. And this is when you want to be as far away from these cities as possible. This is what I've been telling you guys. It's what God's been warning me about over and over again over the last several years. So that's pretty much the entire decode. That was 8 episodes. And hopefully I was clear about this. Let's go into the chat for a little bit and see what you guys are up to before we get off of here.